Welcome back to Urgent Care. This is Minda Wilson, and one of the issues that's very near and dear to my heart is veteran well-being, veteran health, and I'm very excited to have on my show today Boone Cutler. He is an advocate for veterans. He's very involved in the Spartan Pledge, and I'm just so excited to talk to you. Welcome, Boone.
Thanks, Minda. I appreciate you having me on your show.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about the Spartan Pledge and how that came about, and what that means.
Well, the Spartan Pledge is a battle drill, and all the warfighters out there knows what that means. It means, when you get into a situation, you already have a plan. You have a plan, you know what to do. And the way the plan came together, the way the pledge came together, is a brother of mine that I was in Iraq with had just called me, and he was, he's a little bit down in the dumps because a buddy of his had taken his own life. He had died. He had committed suicide. And then that brought up the conversation between he and I. Had we thought about suicide, and we'd both, been honest with each other, and it was something that was pretty prevalent in both our lives. And so we just agreed. It was as simple as just an agreement that if that day should come that either one of us, was going to take that route, we would at least call the other person first. Don't just check out without explaining something, without saying something, because I knew for me that I would spend the rest of my life, tortured, wondering, why didn't I see it? Why didn't I know something? Why didn't he call me? So on and so forth. And it was the same for him. And so, we agreed, and we're being practical about things. If somebody really, 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 really wants to go that route, nothing's going to stop them, but at least say goodbye before you go. And that was the whole thing, And so we both, we made that agreement. Reached out to another guy that was on the same team with us in Iraq, and come to find out he hadn't even left his house in 2 years. And so that started the conversation, and then we made agreements with each other. From those agreements, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Carl Monger. He said, this is something I think you ought to formalize. This is something that's really, I think, unique. And then that's where the Spartan Pledge came from. And I will not take my own life with my own hand until I talk to my battle buddy first. My mission is to find a mission to help my warfighter family. Because we both realize, everybody is, as I talk to warfighters, as I talk to my brothers, as I talk to people from any war, that every warfighter needs a battle buddy and a mission. Those are the two things that we have to have. We have to have a mission in front of us and a battle buddy next to us. And if we have those two things, everything seems to be okay. But if we're missing either one of those things, life just isn't going right. It's just not right. And so we established this agreement on the front end to be there for each other. So if you get in that mess and you just where you can't even see straight, you know what to do because you've already established a plan.
And it's brother helping brother.
Right. And that's why it works. Because, especially with the military, we take an oath, we take a pledge very seriously. And it's not between, a patient and a doctor. And statistically, those don't work, when it's between a doctor, but when it's between a warfighter member and another warfighter, when it's brother to brother, it's proven that it does work. Right now, we have nobody who's ever taken a Spartan Pledge has ever taken their own life. If they had, I'm sure I would have heard about it because I'm the guy that wrote the pledge, and I get a lot of feedback about it. And it's just amazing that it's amazing to me that we're just wired this way. And if we just accept the fact we're wired this way, things just work better. That's just the way it is.
Well, this is National Suicide Prevention Week. And I think that in honor of that, I'd like to talk a little bit about how one could become a part of the Spartan Pledge, how one can get involved and sign up.
Well, you don't have to do anything really. If you want to do it formally, there's an event. If you go to SpartanAlliance.org, there's an event going on in Mississippi next month, and you can come out. And we'll have the Spartan sword out there, and I can explain what the Spartan sword is. It's a sword that is an actual Spartan sword. It's an exact replica, but it's a replica made out of the steel from the Twin Towers. And it's very, very powerful when you see it. And and guys do rally around the sword, and they'll take the pledge with the sword, and it's a pretty powerful thing. But you don't even have to go that far. If you want to take the Spartan Pledge, you just go online, you find the pledge. It's all over the place. There's a number of sites that host it, and then you go to your battle buddy. And really, the Spartan Pledge isn't for you; it's for your battle buddy. Because when you go to your battle buddy and say, "Hey, man, I want to do this with you," you don't have to memorize the words. You just got to understand it. Before you do anything, you make that call, and you both agree that nothing will happen until you talk to each other. And the other thing is, you make sure you have a mission in your life. And once you have those two things, well, then you have the Spartan Pledge.
It's just a very simple, elegant way to build connectedness among people who have really done a service for our country. And I think it's a phenomenal tool for helping people.
It is. And, I want to say that it's not just the military that has really accepted the Spartan Pledge, but also FDNY. FDNY is having a horrible issue right now with suicide from the 9/11 responders. The sickness, the 9/11 sicknesses that are happening from the guys that were working down at the Twin Towers. I'd love to bring more attention to that. People need to understand that a lot of these guys are dying horrible deaths with illnesses, and suicide is pretty prevalent. And so they've got together, and they've accepted the Spartan Pledge as their own as well. And so they're taking it with each other there for FDNY too. So it's moving not just within the military, but it's also moving along, law enforcement, first responders. So everybody they've got that plan. They know what to do ahead of time.
Tell me a little bit about your background. Did you go into the military right out of high school? How did you come to be in Iraq?
Well, I come from a family of warfighters. It was just kind of in my blood. I was the first one to join the Army. I left home when I was 17. I joined the Army when I was 18. I went away, did my first enlistment, and got out, and then went back in, reclassed my MOS, got out, and came back in after 9/11. After 9/11, a lot of guys came back in who had served before, and wanted to serve again, and I was one of those guys. So I went back in, literally just contacted my old unit after 9/11 and said, "Hey, are you guys hot?" And he was like, "Yep, we're hot." I said, "Okay, give me a paragraph and line number, I'll come back in." And so they did. They got me a paragraph and line number. I went right back to my old unit, did a train up, and went to Iraq.
How long were you there in Iraq?
Yeah, I was in Iraq in 2005, 2006. I was stationed in an area called Sadr City. That was my area of operation. And I was injured in Iraq. I was injured in a mortar explosion. I was injured in a fall, a couple other little things. But for the most part, the big thing that really rung my bell was the mortar. So we didn't know anything about blast wave explosion. We didn't know anything about blast wave injuries at the time. And then I finished my tour. It wasn't anything that I really knew what to do with. I knew I was having trouble with things, and I really wasn't recognizing the symptoms. But long story short, I finished my tour, and then right when we had right seat, left seat, like the new guys were coming in, I ended up going back to another base. They checked me out, and they said, "Hey, you got some real problems here." So they medevaced me out of Iraq. I went to Longstuhl, Germany. Longstuhl, Germany did an evaluation. They said, I was suffering from a head injury and some other orthopedic injuries. Then Longstuhl sent me to Walter Reed. I spent 2 years at Walter Reed getting help and going through the whole thing. And that's it.
Yeah, head injuries are big problems for veterans. You have that inclusive explosion, and it impacts you just like football players. I mean, people are learning now that, long-term effects of having your head whacked, and so I think we have to bring awareness to the fact that a lot of the symptoms that people associate with PTSD often are aligned with the symptoms one suffers from head injuries.
That's true. Traumatic brain injury, the same symptoms, they overlap with traumatic brain injury, and that's why a lot of people don't see it. But the issues are when you've got traumatic brain injury, it's a little bit harder to it's a lot harder to learn new things, and you kind of ingrained in different behaviors a little bit differently than if you're just dealing with post-traumatic stress. So it's a little bit harder to overcome.
Because to be honest with you, the brain actually has suffered a physical injury, which negatively impacts, the brain cells, brain development for the rest of your life. So any kind of brain injury like that.
The way they explained it to us was, blast waves go through the brain. It tears the brain fibers, the little neurosensors that connect with each other, which are basically your drive paths. It's how you know how to do just the different things. And then as the brain heals, when you're in a combat environment, the brain heals in a combat environment. So you have a combat brain. And the way you think about things, again, those little neurofibers reattach. Well, they reattach in that combat environment. So the way you see things, the way you react to things, the way you have to live to survive, well, now that becomes your operating system in your brain. Pulled your brain out, put somebody else's in, and they never gave you a user manual for it. So you got to kind of figure it out as you go along. But what we do know is that if you rewire in that combat environment, you've got a combat brain. And so you're going to think, like, again, on that platform, if I can, steal it from the IT guys, your operating system is a combat brain.
And once you have that combat brain, that brain carries with you when you return to the States from your tour of duties. That's correct, right?
Yeah, that's true. And so that's where the biggest split is between TBI and PTSD. PTSD, which is an epigenetic adaptation, through methylated DNA. It's not a mental condition at all, but we can talk about that if you want to. But that combat brain, you're thinking on that platform all the time. And so you come back to the civilian world, and where some people would apply a certain specific rule of logic to a situation, well, you're going to apply different rules of logic to that situation because you have the logic of a combat brain, where other people will have a more socially logical brain. Your brain's not socially logical at all. It's completely pragmatically logical because of the combat environment. And so you're losing the social aspect completely.
So you're basically operating in a combat survival mode in a world that is not operating in that combat survival mode. They're operating in a social mode. Is that how I understand it?
Exactly correct, yes. And basically, when you're talking about the combat survival mode, you're really just talking about being pragmatic. You're ultra pragmatic. And that's the best way to put it. You're not walking around like a psychopathic killer. I mean, I got to make sure that people understand that when I say a combat brain. But the combat brain is ultra pragmatic. It is A equals B equals C, and there's not a lot of nuance stuck in there because in honesty, there's not a lot of nuance in a combat environment. And so you become very, very pragmatic with the things you have to do, and you turn off your emotions. And my particular injury with the TBI, what it left me was I had you have a memory of an emotional memory. My emotional memory was completely wiped out. And so then again, more pragmatism. So you have a very ultra pragmatic mind. In a lot of ways, once you learn to adjust with that in the civilian world, then you have your post-traumatic growth. And because you've learned how to use that brain. And to be honest with you, people are very successful that are pragmatic. And right. So a lot of guys come home, that combat brain works to their advantage after they learn how to use it. But it takes time to learn how to use it.
Right, because a pragmatic brain is a very task-oriented, accomplished goal brain. And so I can see that can be very very valuable in a competitive economic world.
Yes, ma'am. That's the truth. That's how it happens. But guys got to be able to survive the training time, and that's not always easy.
Right. Well, they're the social, because they lack the social alignment. They aren't getting the social positive feedback they might need to help with the transition that you described.
Right, and we are not so worried about the social recognition. It's like we just want to achieve, and like I said, that's just it's just very ultra pragmatic, and it probably separates us from other people who live in that emotional social world, and we don't.
It's interesting because one of the things I generally don't like to talk about. One of the things I'm involved in is working with the VA, and what I've learned is 22 veterans a day commit suicide, and one of the reasons, the most significant reasons why that happens is, as you described earlier in our conversation, is that they feel sort of they're not connected back to the society in which they're living. There's a disconnect. We're working on an application that's hopefully allowing that connectedness, not just between the brothers who can be connected in the application, but between all the people who are trying to manage their care, doctors, physicians, and one of the other big problems that we've learned about is opioid addiction. That's also a significant problem for the members of the military who've come home. So how do you feel? Do you feel that there's something, that connectedness and the military pledge that you described and the ability to relate to other similar people will make a difference with that?
Well, it does make a difference. Everybody, humans are social creatures. We may come back and not be so social, but we want to be social in our own way. And so when I always think group therapy really isn't about the therapy, it's about the group. The group is the therapy. And I'm not a fan of group therapy, I mean, I don't want to sit in a room and talk about stuff. But if I'm in a place where there are other war fighters, and even in social media, and we can just and it's not that we're talking about, war story this, war story that. We just kind of know certain things about each other, and so we get along with each other. We're aligned. And a big reason that alignment takes place is, again, back to the methylation. People had it right forever. I mean, forever. When warfighters came home from war, they said, hey, this is like a different person. My family member's a different person, so on and so forth. They're not the same person. Well, the truth is they're not the same person. One, if you have traumatic brain injury, it's going to change your personality, so you're not going to be the same person. But aside from that, just PTSD alone, being an epigenetic adaptation to methylated DNA, basically your DNA changes under stress, and that's the truth. And nothing can change your DNA faster than a combat zone. So warfighters, when they come home, not only have they share the same experiences, but their DNA has changed in the same way. I mean, for lack of a better term, we really are family because we've developed the same DNA, epigenetically. And so, this is just the truth. And so all these family members forever that have been saying, oh my goodness, my family member is a different person. Well, they were right. They've always been right. That's what PTSD is. It has nothing to do with anything psychological at all. There is something called PTSD. That's what, women have that have been raped. It's people that have been through car accidents or natural disasters. But what we have from a combat environment is something totally different. We have changed the DNA. We're a different person. So when we come home, we are a different person like other people because other people have been through the same thing, and that's the warfighter community.
So if you're feeling isolated, if you're a veteran, you're feeling isolated, how do you reconnect with that community?
A lot of people are doing it through social media. I mean, it's very easy to find, different groups and, that are in the military. The other way to do it is go through the Vet Center. I think the Vet Center is great for combat veterans. It's run by combat veterans. It's for combat veterans. There's a vet center in every major city. It's connected to the VA, but it's not the VA. But they have all your records there. They can do all your claims, everything else. They've got counseling there. But that's where a lot of guys do get connected, through the Vet Center. You can get connected to my site, Boone Cutler on Facebook. I mean, it's primarily veterans. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways for guys to get involved. And I know guys that step away from the community for a number of years, go back to school, get their MBAs, and then things just start, once they get away from that mission and they buried their head in the sand, school and whatnot, then they start getting kind of funky again. And once they get back into the community in some way, some sort of service on some level, things straighten themselves out again. They just do. We have to be in our group on some level part of the time with our life. It doesn't matter if it's going out rock climbing with the guys. It doesn't matter if it's going out shooting with the guys. It doesn't matter what it is. But we have to have that connection to the community. And everybody out there, if your life isn't going right, you're part of the warfighter community, and you're not in the community, you got to get in the community. That's the way this works.
So in that, I'd like to say specifically that there is a place for you to go, these vets, and reconnect with other veterans. You don't have to be if you feel isolated, you don't have to be. You're able to connect up through Boone Cutler's website, which is www.boonecutler.com. You can go to the vet centers and you can take advantage of the opportunity to connect with other people who've had the similar experiences to you, are like-minded as you, and understand on a visceral level, on a DNA level, what you've been through and what you're going through now. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yeah, and if I put that in warfighter language, it looks like this. If I'm talking to another warfighter, I'd say this: hey, things suck. You don't want to be around civilians all the time because they just don't understand. Well, stop being around things that suck and be around warfighters that kind of get you, that understand things. And it's not necessarily about know what you're going through. It's about knowing who you are. You don't have to explain anything. And that's part of the connection is, within the community, you don't have to explain anything. People already know who you are.
There's a couple of other things I wanted to talk to you about before we end this. And one was your interest in medical cannabis. How did you become involved in that?
Medical cannabis was when I was at Walter Reed. After I left Walter Reed, I was on what we refer to as the combat cocktail, the zombie dope, because it makes you a zombie completely. It's just unbelievable. But and I don't think anybody was trying to do anything bad at the time, but it wasn't good for me. And anyway, I think it causes a lot of suicidal ideation because you don't have the ability to slow yourself down. I remember I was reaching for my gun in my closet to put it to my head, and I was going to blow my head off. I was just going to kill myself. And I was thinking to myself, this is kind of crazy because I should want to stop. I know I should want to stop, but I don't want to stop. I have no impulse to save my own life. And for me, I have to intellectualize things. It's part of that pragmatic thing that we were talking about before. And that interested me. And so the drugs, that's a lot of what the drugs were. They were taking away the impulses from you because they're trying to stem your impulses so you don't get angry or so you don't have issues. But if they stem your impulses, they can't really pick which ones. And so if you should have the impulse to save your own life, well, that impulse is gone too. And so you just go right through it. And warfighters know a suicide is one death you'll never have to mourn. We've already seen death. We know what death's all about. It's, people got to understand warfighters aren't taking their lives because they're selfish. They feel like, they're a burden to their family. They're injured. They're wounded. They've come home. They used to be total badasses, and now for some reason things aren't going right. They can't figure out why. They don't have a battle blade. They don't have a mission. Nobody understands them. And then things don't go right. Things start going wrong in the family. And once they start feeling like they're a burden to their family, it's just a natural impulse to get yourself out of there, And it's a distortion. I want to tell every warfighter out there, if you feel like the world would be better off without you, that's a distortion. I talk to families after warfighters have taken their own life, and I've asked them point blank within 24 hours of the suicide, is your life better without that warfighter? And all I ever see is the most unquenchable sound, this person, the pain that they have when they can barely utter the words no is unbelievable. Suicide doesn't stop the pain. It just transfers it to the people that love you. You're gone, but they get your pain. And that's the truth. I don't know. I hope people are hearing what I'm saying, because I'm putting it all together for you. And this is what makes sense to the warfighter community. We're trying to reach you guys too. We're just now starting to work this out, but this is what we're thinking. This is what we're going through. For everybody else out there, I hope I'm explaining it well enough so you can understand too.
So for us, it's a mission to get them connected up as well. We can help people by getting them connected to people who will be part of their warfighter community, and that's a way we can help them.
Yeah, I got a little sidetracked there. You're asking about cannabis. I was on the zombie dope for a number of years, and it wasn't for me. It was the suicidal ideation was unreal, and so I went into a psych ward. I mean, for lack of a better term, I checked myself into a psych ward at the VA, and I said, I'm not taking the drugs anymore. And they're like, you have to. You're gonna go crazy. And I was like, the door's locked. Let's go crazy. And let's see what happens. And so after 17 days, I was off the drugs, and cognitively, I started to have this reboot. I started being able to think better. And then I couldn't sleep, though. I had the injury I have inside my brain prevents me from being able to sleep. And anyway, it's just crazy for me. But after about 2 days, I still couldn't sleep. And this young guy tells me, hey, you look like hell. What's going on? I said, I can't sleep. He said, why don't you smoke pot? I was like, man, get that away from me. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not a pothead. So I just dismissed him. Another day, I didn't sleep. And I've got a little bit of an ego. I don't want to go back to the VA and say, hey, you were right, I was wrong. Give me my drugs back. And I knew I'd done everything medical science had to offer when it came to trying to be able to sleep and insomnia. So I told the guy, okay, give me some weed. He got me some weed. That night I slept 5 hours. I didn't sleep 5 hours in 5 years. It was amazing. Amazing. I mean, because before I was taking all the zombie dope, plus to get down at night, a little bit of NyQuil and a whole lot of scotch was helping too. I didn't have to do that anymore. Cannabis put me to sleep. So I started using cannabis to sleep, but I couldn't use it during the daytime because of the psychotropic effects. So I was still taking the painkillers. And I always said, if you give me something that helps with the pain, I'll stop taking the painkillers. Because chronic pain is painful. I mean, it hurts. It drives you crazy. Well, then I was introduced to CBD. I started taking CBD. It takes care of my pain during the day. I don't need opiates anymore. So I mean, right there, with CBD during the daytime and higher THC at night for insomnia. I mean, they're right there. Both cannabis products. They work, and I don't have the problems that I had with all the zombie dope.
And so your cognitive skills are fresh. You can think. You're able to work, socialize, have a normal life. But your pain is gone and you're able to sleep. So that sounds like a pretty good bargain, giving up all this medication for CBD and marijuana.
It's worked for me, and it works for a lot of guys, and surprisingly, because I'm so open about it, a lot of people who are afraid to be open about it, they talk to me. And what they always say, I mean, they're like, hey, Boone, I do it too, but don't tell anybody. I can't let anybody know. And I'm here to tell you, there's a lot of people out there doing it that just don't say they're doing it. It's a lot of people. It's a lot more than you might think. And I think most people just want to see it done responsibly. Again, of course we want it to be done responsibly, but of all the medications I've ever taken, if you ask me, okay, which one can't stop your breathing, you won't become addicted to, and in no way can you overdose. The only medication I've taken I can say that about is cannabis. Every other drug addicted me. I could overdose and could stop my breathing in my sleep. Cannabis can't do that. So why wouldn't I choose cannabis if it works better and it's safer? And that's just a medical fact.
It was a great pleasure talking to you. I hope you'll come back again and we can discuss more about the effects of marijuana. This is Minda Wilson for Urgent Care.